Just give me a second. Right. Okay. Now, can you see my screen? So the first topic in A2 economics is economic efficiency, right? Now, what is economic efficiency, students? So economic efficiency is the concept of making that says that countries should make most efficient use of their resources. Now think about this. Why is making most efficient use of resources important, right? So think about this. Every country, we know from our AS economics that every country in the world has limited resources and unlimited wants, right? Now, when you have this problem, which is known as basic economic problem, which is limited resources and unlimited wants, so you can't afford to waste your resources, right? Is it making sense? So as a country, you can't afford to waste your resources, and therefore, and think my writing down, right? So there is this concept known as basic economic problem, which means that you have limited resources. Forget about this, right? You have limited resources and unlimited wants, therefore you want to make the most efficient use of your resources, right? Okay, now this is basic economic problem, refers to the concept of limited resources and unlimited wants, right? Since there are limited resources available to an economy, it's very important to make best possible use of these resources, which brings us to the concept of economic efficiency, right? Okay, so now what we are doing in today's class, we are starting off with the first topic of A2 economics, which is economic efficiency. So what we'll do in each of our classes, we'll quickly revise the concept in the first half, and then in the second half, we'll do past papers related to that topic. So the first topic is economic efficiency, and that is what we have started off with. Okay. Now, what is efficiency? Efficiency is a very common word that we all hear every day, here and there, right? Efficiency means making efficient or most productive use of something, right? Efficiently using your time or resources and so on. Now, what is economic efficiency and why is that important? So economic efficiency means making best possible use of resources. What does economic efficiency means? Making best possible use of resources. Why is this important? This is important because we know that there is something known as basic economic problem, which means countries have limited resources and unlimited wants. So no country in the world can produce everything that it wants. But what it can do is to make efficient use of its resources, right? So that's why economic efficiency is very important for all countries. So in simple words, what is this? Economic efficiency is best possible use of resources, and therefore it is the best solution for economic problem. Economic problem doesn't has any solution to it, right? But when we are making best possible use of resources, only then we can try to solve basic economic problem. That's why economic efficiency is important, right? Okay, now choice and opportunity cost is something that we have always studied in our AS, and we know what it is, right? So why do we need to make choice? Because there are limited resources, and they are unlimited wants, so we can't have everything that we need, right? So we have to choose which thing to buy, which thing to have, and what things to give up on, right? And whenever we give up on something, that is known as opportunity cost. So it is basically the benefit of next best alternative forgone. Okay, now moving forward, relationship between basic economic problem and economic efficiency. Whenever resources are limited, which resources always are, you want to make the best possible use of resources, which is known as economic efficiency, right? Now, economic efficiency is basically split into two parts, right? So economic efficiency is split into two parts, which is productive and allocative efficiency, right? And we'll talk about both of these two concepts. So both of these concepts should be present for an economy to be defined as economically efficient, right? So what are the two components of economic efficiency? Productive efficiency and allocative efficiency. Now, what is productive efficiency? Productive efficiency is when you produce at the lowest possible cost. What is productive efficiency? When an economy is producing on the lowest possible cost, that is productive efficiency. Now, the formula to calculate productive efficiency, let me show you, right? It is output over input. What is output? Output is something that a business is producing, right? This can be in terms of, final goods and services that are being produced. For instance, how many units of laptops are being produced in a laptop producing factory, how many units of clothes are being produced in a clothing business, and so on and so forth. So output is basically in terms of final goods and services that any business produces. And that divided by input is basically how you calculate productive efficiency, right? Now, how do we know if a business is productively efficient or not? That's another important question, right? So the way we know if a business is productively efficient or not is by looking at its ATC curve. Now, what is ATC curve? Students, by the way, for each of my classes, just to clarify this early on, that you are feel free to ask me any question that you have. Just type it in the chat box, right? And I'll answer your question there and then, right? Don't wait towards the end of the class for your question to be answered, right? So you can ask any question that you might have during the class. Okay. Now, how do we know whether a business is productively efficient or not? So output over input is the formula of productive efficiency. And we know we get to find out if a business is productively efficient or not by looking at its ATC curve. What's the shape of the ATC curve? Students, have a look at this. So ATC curve is a U-shaped graph that looks like this. Okay. Now let's say this is ATC1. Then there might be another ATC lower than this, which is ATC2, and then there might be another ATC of the business, which could be lower than ATC2, which is ATC3, right? Now, if a business is operating on the lowest possible ATC curve, if the business is operating on the lowest possible ATC curve, then it is productively efficient, right? Right? Need to operate on lowest possible ATC curve for a business to be productively efficient. Lowest possible, students, are you following this? Possible ATC curve. Okay. Now, if these are the three possible options for a firm, and if it's operating on ATC1 or ATC2, right? So these two curves are not productively efficient, but ATC3 is productively efficient, right? Okay, yes, it will be uploaded on YouTube. Don't worry about it. You will get all the recorded lectures. For now, during the class, I just want you to focus on what we're doing. Yeah, we'll get access to all of these lectures. Okay, now think about this. Then another question that a lot of students ask me, that is every point on ATC3 productively efficient? Like what I mean when I say every point, right? Now on ATC3, if you see, there could be point A, there could be point B, point C, point D, and so on. So my question to you is, are all points on this ATC curve productively efficient, or only the lowest of the lowest point, which is C, that is productively efficient? And the answer to this is that all points on lowest possible ATC curve are productively, exactly, very good, Preet. All points, right? All points on lowest possible ATC are productively efficient. All points on lowest possible ATC.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, is ATC different than average cost?
No, it's the same thing. ATC stands for average total cost. It's the same thing. It's the same thing, right? So basically, let me answer your question, right? So no, it's the same thing. So this ATC stands for average total cost. So what we are looking at, that how much it costs to produce a typical unit of the good, right? So when we look at this U-shaped ATC curve, right? So on the x-axis, we have output. So it will show that, let's say at an output of 50 units, how much it costs you to produce a typical unit of the good. That's what it's showing us, right? On the other hand, if you want to look at point A, so it will show that if you're producing a total output of 30 units, let's say, how much will be the, how much is the average cost of producing 30 units of the good and 50 units of the good, and so on and so forth. It's the same thing. It's the same thing, right? So in simple words, when a business is minimizing its average total cost, the cost of producing something, then it is productively efficient, right? So when a business is minimizing, does this answer your question? When a business is minimizing its average cost of producing something, great. When a business is minimizing its average cost of producing that product, then it is said to be productively efficient, right? Okay, so what is productively efficient? As we just discussed, productive efficiency is when a company makes a product at the lowest possible cost, right? And how do we look at it? How do we see if a business is productively efficient or not? If it's operating on the lowest possible ADC curve, then it is productively efficient. Otherwise, it's not, right? Makes sense? Easy. Okay, now moving forward, students, the other component of efficiency is allocative efficiency. Now, what is allocative efficiency? Allocative efficiency is producing goods that are most wanted. Now have a look at this. What is allocative efficiency? Let me write down this for you. So allocative efficiency, the word allocative comes from the word allocation, right? You might remember this word from your AS economics when we used to say how a country should allocate its resources. Now, what we meant by that, that which product should a country produce more of? How should it allocate its resources, right? So if I say that, how will you allocate your income? What I basically mean that how do you plan to spend your income on different goods and services, right? So similarly, allocative efficiency means what goods and services should a country produce. Now, how would we know if a country is allocatively efficient or not? When, right? So when is an economy allocatively efficient? When an economy is producing goods that are most wanted, right? When an economy, and I'll tell you how do we know which goods are most wanted. When an economy is producing goods that are most wanted or needed, as you can say, those are most wanted or needed, and these goods are produced in optimal quantities. And these goods are produced in optimal quantities. Now, what does optimal quantity means? I'll tell you. Are produced in optimal quantities. Okay, students, have a look at this. Now, think about this. At any point in time, an economy will always have limited resources. We know this because basic economic problem always exists. Now, what a country needs to decide, a challenge for an economy is to decide what products should it focus on, right? What products should it produce more of, right? That's why one part of allocative efficiency means, now says that you should produce goods that are most wanted, and the second part of allocative efficiency says that you should produce these goods in optimal quantities, right? Okay, now how do we know if an economy is achieving allocative efficiency? Just like we saw that, when you produce on the lowest possible ATC curve, that is productively efficient. Similarly, we are about to look at that. How do we tell if an economy is allocatively efficient or not, right? So the answer to that is exactly, very good, Amna. So the answer to that is when you are producing at the point where price is equals to marginal cost. So when the price is equals to marginal cost, that is the point of allocative efficiency. Let me show you on the graph, right? Now, have a look at this. So first thing that you need to draw on the allocative efficiency graph is a downward sloping demand curve. Now we know demand curve for any product is downward sloping. Now this is the demand, and demand curve always shows us what? On the y-axis, demand curve shows us the price. So I can write this down as D equals P, right? So demand curve shows you the price, right? Yes or no, right? Okay. Now, another graph that we will add to this is of marginal cost. So this J-shaped upward sloping graph is for marginal cost. Now, what is marginal cost? You would remember marginal cost is the additional cost of producing one more unit of good, right? How much it costs you to produce one additional unit of good, that is your marginal cost. Now, where the marginal cost and price are equal, right? That output level is allocatively efficient. So I'm writing this down as QA, meaning that this is allocatively efficient output level. If let's say this is equals to 500 units. Students, have a look at this. So if QA is equals to 500 units, this means that this business should produce 500 units of this product to be allocatively efficient. So if it's producing something less than 500, this means that there is underproduction of the good. You're not producing as much as you should, right? So there's underproduction of the good if it's less than 500. And if you are producing anything more than 500, obviously that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why? Because beyond 500, what is true? Beyond 500 units of output, your cost is greater than your price. So it means that it's costing you more to produce the good compared to how much it sells it for, how much you sell it for, right? So obviously this area shows loss for the business, right? Because you can see for yourself that this purple or pink line, which is marginal cost, is higher than your price, right? So it's costing you more to produce each additional unit compared to how much you sell it for. So obviously no business would want to produce anything more than 500, but anything less than 500 is also not allocatively efficient, because it's this point where price is equals to marginal cost, which is allocatively efficient. So a business should produce at P is equals to MC for it to be allocatively efficient. Um, Right, ideally, yes. Laiba, yes. So if you, and we will see as we come to the past papers practice in a bit, right, that a lot of questions says with the help of a diagram. So when a question says with the help of a diagram, then there are marks reserved for diagrams, right? So ideally, you should remember these, and it's not very difficult. As we'll practice more past papers, you'll get to memorize all of these graphs. It's not that difficult, right? So far we have talked about two graphs, right? So how do we show whether a business is productively efficient or not? If it's operating on the lowest possible ADC curve, right? So if there are these three possible ADC curves, 1, 2, and 3, we can see that 3 is the lowest ADC curve, and therefore it is productively efficient. On the other hand, um, how do we show if a business is allocatively efficient or not? So when it's producing at the level, right, where price is equals to marginal cost, that is allocatively efficient. If you produce anything less than this, it's underproduction. And why would you not want to produce anything more than that? Because that means that the business will make a loss, right? So you'll never want to exceed this. Easy. We good on this? Any confusion, students? Anything that's not clear, right? Okay.
सर वो जो
Now,
प्रोडक्टिव
yes.
एफिशिएंसी वाला ग्राफ है
Yeah.
वो जो प्रोडक्टिव एफिशिएंसी वाला ग्राफ है उसके साइड पे क्या डलेगा उसकी वाई एक्सिस पे
So this is the y-axis, average total cost. So on the y-axis of productive efficiency graph, we have ATC, average total cost,
तो
right?
सर ये जैसे पॉइंट बी ए है तो नीचे 30 है और दूसरी साइड पे क्या होगा
This is output now. So this x-axis is output, 30 units, and how much is the average total cost? So let's say $5. So each unit is costing you $5 when you're producing 30 units. When
ओके
you produce 50 units, each unit will cost you $3, right? Okay. Now this being said, okay, so we have talked about the two components of economic efficiency, right? May I request you to put yourself on mute, right? Okay, so when both the components of efficiency, allocative and productive efficiency concepts are clear or are present, only then an economy is economically efficient. Okay. Another graph that we make for allocative efficiency is through PPC, right? Do you guys remember what PPC was? One more graph that we draw to show whether an economy is achieving allocative efficiency or not is by looking at its production possibility curve. So if you're operating on production possibility curve, then it's allocatively efficient, right? Now think about this. So you can have any two goods on your production possibility curve. And what is production possibility curve? You will remember this from your AS classes, that it's a graph that shows maximum output that a country can produce in terms of two goods, right? So let's say we are looking at these two products, cars and cell phones. So the PPC of an economy is a downward sloping curve like this, right? Okay. Now, if an economy is operating somewhere within its PPC, this means that it's not fully utilizing its resources, and that's why it's underproducing. Yes or no? So when you operate on any point within the curve, this means that an economy is not fully utilizing its resources, and therefore it's not maximizing its output. So therefore, it cannot be allocatively efficient. Why? Because you're not fully utilizing your resources. When you move from a point within the curve to a point on the curve, now this is where you are fully utilizing your resources, right? And that is where you will be able to produce more goods, right? A greater quantity of the goods. So you can see for yourself that on point B, an economy is producing, let's say, 60,000 units of cars, which was greater than what was being produced on point A, which was 50,000, and you're also producing greater quantity of cell phones, right? This is making sense, students, right? Okay, yeah, Amna, please go ahead, right? So when an economy is operating on the curve, right? Amna, what's your question?
Sir, for productive efficiency, can we say
Yes.
that when AC is equal to MC, that is also productive efficiency? So do we have two graphs? That means one is like
So
the lowest point, and the other is when MC graph meets the AC point.
no, think about this. Think about this. So you're confusing this out. I'm not thinking about this. So this graph was for the productive efficiency. So average total cost, because what's the definition of productive efficiency? Producing something at the lowest possible cost. And how do we know what the cost of producing a unit is? By looking at its ATC. Are you getting me? By looking at the ATC, we know that how much it costs to produce a typical unit of the good. So when you're producing on lowest possible ATC, that's productive efficiency. So this is the graph that you need to draw to know whether a firm is productively efficient or not. Right? Is it making sense? As far as allocative efficiency is concerned, the later two graphs that we have just looked at, those are for allocative efficiency, right? Think about this. So the first one that we made, because what was the definition of allocative efficiency? Producing goods that are most wanted, and these goods are produced in optimal quantities, right? Right. So this one first graph for allocative efficiency is when your marginal cost is equals to your demand curve, right? When your marginal cost, which is J-shaped graph, is equals to your demand curve, which shows you the price. So when price is equals to marginal cost, this is your allocative efficiency. And the second graph that now we are looking at for allocative efficiency is production possibility curve, PPC, right? So when an economy is operating on its PPC, then it is allocatively efficient. Any point within the curve is not allocatively efficient. Any point on the curve is allocatively efficient. Right? Amna, does this answer your question?
Yes, sir. There was a graph that I learned in school for allocative efficiency. If I could just try and draw it here,
Yeah.
it was this, and allocative efficiency was on the point when sorry, productive efficiency was on the point when MC is equal to AC.
Okay, so you're talking about perfect competition. We haven't come to that part yet. Let me tell you. So these are the basics. Yeah. So this is where perfect competition comes into play. I'll show you in a bit. I'll show you in a bit. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. But these are the basics one. Let me tell you, right? Just a second. Is allocative efficiency. Okay. Now think about this. So what you need to remember, have a look at this. Students, have a look at this. So Amna, first remember this, where price is equals to marginal cost, that is allocative efficiency, right? So this is the basic thing that you need to remember. And where you're operating on the lowest possible ATC curve, that is productive efficiency. Is everything clear so far? Right? Just remember
Yes,
these two
sir.
things for now, right? What's the definition of productive efficiency? Producing on the lowest possible cost curve or producing at the lowest possible cost. And allocative efficiency is producing goods that are most wanted in optimal quantities, right? Okay, now after we have known this, now we need to know in which scenarios economic efficiency exists and in which scenarios economic efficiency doesn't exist, right? So that's the next part, right? So economic efficiency, what the graph that you just made on the whiteboard was for perfect competition that we're about to see next, right? So economic efficiency exists. We are about to list scenarios where economic efficiency exists in the economy. And similarly, there will be scenarios where economic efficiency doesn't exist. So the two most popular cases in this are of perfect competition where economic efficiency exists, right? And monopoly where economic efficiency does not exist. And we will look at the graph for both of these two, right? So economic efficiency exists. So in this, we have a case of perfect competition, and where economic efficiency doesn't exist, that is monopoly, and few other cases that we'll discuss later, right? So in perfect competition, there is economic efficiency. In monopoly, there is no economic efficiency. And then there are few other cases that we'll talk about, right? Like externalities, economic efficiency doesn't exist, right? Then you have merit and demerit goods, right? So these are all cases of market failure. Now, let me explain you. Let me give you some background of this, right? Students, think about this. Now, so far we have talked about that economic efficiency is important for an economy to solve the issue of basic economic problem. What is basic economic problem? Resources are always limited and wants are always, needs and wants are always unlimited, right? Now, since you cannot have unlimited resources, no country in the world, no matter what country you think about, USA, India, China, no country in the world has unlimited resources. So what a country can do is to just make good use of its resources or best use of its resources. Now, for that to happen, you have to achieve economic efficiency, which has two components, productive and allocative, right? Now, scenarios where economic efficiency exists is perfect competition, and scenario where economic efficiency doesn't exist is known as market failure. So scenarios where economic efficiency doesn't exist are known as, what are these known? These are known as market failure. So it means market failure. Why do we call it market failure? Because the market has failed to achieve economic efficiency. That is how you should remember this. So when market has failed to achieve economic efficiency, we call it market failure, right? And what are some cases of market failure? When there's monopoly, when there are externalities, when there's information asymmetry, right? I'll explain you what this is, right? Information asymmetry, and these are some cases of market failure, which we'll discuss one by one. Okay, now students, should we keep moving, right? Okay, now the first case that we're about to discuss now is perfect competition. Now have a look at this, right? Now, what is perfect competition? A quick recap. Perfect competition is a market structure, right, that we studied in unit 2 as well. It is when there are a lot of firms, right? In fact, let me show you a slide, quickly show you a slide that lists all the characteristics of perfect competition, right? So perfect competition is a market structure where there are a lot of firms, right? So just a second. Okay, have a look at this. So this is the graph that I made, right? So economic efficiency exists in perfect competition and no economic efficiency / market failure, monopoly, externalities, information asymmetry, and so on and so forth, right? Okay, now perfect competition. Think about this. What is it? Perfect competition is a model that serves as a benchmark, like standard for economic efficiency, right? Okay, now what is perfect competition? These are the characteristics of perfect competition. Can you see my screen? So the first characteristic, students, that there are a lot of buyers and sellers of the product, right? Second characteristic is that there are no entry and exit barriers. What are entry and exit barriers? You would remember that if there is any constraint or obstacle that makes it difficult for the new firms to enter the market, that's entry barrier, right? So in perfect competition, there is no entry and exit barriers. Then there is complete information with consumers. Consumers exactly know how many firms are selling a certain product, how much is the price they are charging for the good, how much price they are charging for their products, and so on, right? Firms are price takers, which means that no single firm can influence market prices, right? So firms are price taker. Whatever price is prevailing in the market, each firm will sell at that price, right? You can't charge a price higher than that. And firms sell identical products, homogeneous products, right? So there's no element of branding. Got it, students? Now, what is an ideal example of perfect competition? Think about this. So an ideal example of perfect competition would be agricultural products. Now, think about this. So you must have observed, and you might have sometime visited farmers market and, other, markets that are set up in different countries, right? Where you go and you will see different vendors selling the same product. So if you think of agricultural products, right, like vegetables, fruits, and things like that, right? So the prices of these products is already set, right? And every vendor is selling at the same price. So if, let's say, 100 kg is the price of 100 rupees is the price of per kg of apples in Pakistan at the moment, right? So no matter what part of the country you go to, you will see the price to be fixed, right, during that certain time. Why? Because apples are the same, right, everywhere. So whatever price is prevailing in the market, every vendor will be selling at that price. Another thing that we discussed is that there is no branding right? There's no branding, right? If you think of raw vegetables, I'm not talking about processed products. I'm talking about raw vegetables or raw fruits. I mean, there's no branding, right? Apples are apples, oranges are oranges, right? So there is therefore no element of branding. Consumers have complete information. They know, how much is the price and so on. And firms are price takers, as I said. Whatever price is prevailing in the market, they will sell at that price, right? Is this clear? Is everyone clear on this? Okay. Now, when we make the graph of perfect competition, students, have a look at this, right? So the graph of perfect competition, now this is where you need to pay close attention, right? So the graph of perfect competition looks like this. Just a second, right? So what you will have on the y-axis, so on the y-axis of every graph, you will have price and cost. Not every graph, but the market structures graph that we will make, right? So you have price and cost on the y-axis, and on the x-axis you have output, how many units of the good are being produced, right? So on the x-axis you have output. Okay, now then what's first thing that you need to add to the graph, right? So the first thing that you add to the graph is demand curve. Now, why is the demand curve a straight horizontal line, right? Do you remember? So when the demand for a product is perfectly elastic, right? When the demand for the good is perfectly elastic, right? That's known as, that's known as, that that looks like a straight horizontal line, right? Perfectly elastic. You must remember this from your AS economics class. So whenever demand for a product is perfectly elastic, that looks like a straight horizontal line. So this is your demand curve, which shows you how much is the price of each kg of a certain product, let's say apples or whatever, right? So you can say this is output of apples, right? And then this is your demand curve, which shows you the price on the y-axis, right? Price per kg of apples. This is your demand curve, which also shows you your marginal revenue. Now, what is marginal revenue, right? So marginal revenue, just to give you a quick idea, right? Marginal revenue is additional revenue gained from sale of one more unit of the good. So marginal revenue is change in revenue divided by change in output. Do you guys remember this? Right? So how much will be the addition in revenue due to sale of one more unit of the good? That is your marginal revenue, right? And this delta that I've made, this triangle type of thing is known as delta in maths, and that means change. So what is marginal revenue? Additional revenue gained from sale of one more unit of the good. Is it making sense, students? Additional revenue earned from sale of earned from sale of one more unit of good. Is this easy? Okay, now think about this. Coming back to the graph of perfect competition, I said first thing that you need to draw is to draw the demand curve for the firm. And the demand curve will be straight horizontal line. Why? Because it shows perfectly elastic demand. It shows perfectly elastic demand. Okay, now the second thing that you need to do, just a second, right? Now the second thing that you need to draw on this graph is your marginal cost. What's the other graph you need to add to this? The second graph that you'll add is of, right, okay, Raiva, so think about this. The demand curve for a firm, we are making the graph of perfect competition. We just discussed that perfect competition is a scenario, it's a market structure where economic efficiency exists. And what we are about to look at is that how we can show that in perfect competition economic efficiency exists. So that is what we are about to show, that how economic efficiency exists in perfect competition. So to make the graph of perfect competition, first thing that you have to draw is the demand curve, and the shape of the demand curve is a straight horizontal line which goes like this. Easy, you good on this, right? And I said that this shows you on the y-axis shows you price of each unit of the good. So let's say if you're thinking of quantities of apples, right? So let's say 800 rupees, the price of apples in Pakistan is, let's say, 100 rupees per kg, right? So this is also your demand curve and your marginal revenue. Okay. Now, the second thing that you need to add to this graph is your marginal cost. And we know that the shape of marginal cost is J-shaped graph, which is upward sloping like this. Easy. So I've made the marginal cost graph. Okay. Now, the third and the last thing that you need to add to this graph is your ATC, right? What's the third graph that you'll add? That's your ATC. And we know that ATC is always U-shaped. Just like marginal cost is always J-shaped graph like this, right? Your ATC is always U-shaped graph that we just saw while discussing about productive efficiency. Easy? We good on this, students? Okay. Now think about this. Now comes in the main part. Amna and everyone else, you have to pay close attention to. First question you have to ask yourself that is this business, right? Is this business productively, so what questions we will ask ourselves? Whether this firm in perfect competition is economically efficient or not. So for us to find out whether this firm is economically efficient, we have to look at two things. We have to look at whether the firm is allocatively efficient, and we will have to look at whether the firm is productively efficient, right? So we do know that economic efficiency is made up of these two components. So to see if it's economically efficient or not, we have to see whether productive efficiency exists or not, and similarly whether allocative efficiency exists or not, right? So first of all, my question is that at what output level a firm maximizes its profit? Any private sector firm, at what output level, right? What is the profit maximization quantity for a firm, right? This is the simple question which you might remember. If you don't know, I'll explain you. What is profit maximization quantity for any business? Can any of you answer that for me? What is profit maximization quantity for any business? Right? And this is true for any business, right? At what output level a business maximizes profit, right? So where MC is equals to MR, very good, excellent, right? Where MC is equals to, where MC, okay, Amna, so where MC, where price is equals to marginal cost, that is, no. So that is where allocative efficiency exists. So you have to remember these separately. Think about this. So the exact answer to this question is that where the marginal revenue of a business is equals to its marginal cost, that is allocative, sorry, that is profit maximization quantity. So where marginal revenue of the business is equals to marginal cost, that is where it maximizes its profit. Now have a look at this. Have a look at this. So this is your marginal cost, which is upward sloping. This is your marginal revenue, the pink line. The blue and the pink line are intersecting at this point. Laiba, are you following? Right? So where the marginal revenue is equals to marginal cost, this is your profit maximization quantity, and therefore I've labeled it as QP, profit maximization quantity. Right. So, okay. So I'm ending the class. Students, join with the same link. Click on the same link and join the class.